Just take us through what happened in your own words.
Well, I had been for an important briefing in the Ministry of Defence with Keir Starmer and other colleagues. It was actually a cross-party delegation of Privy Councillors. You will know, Iain, that there are circumstances in which we do get high-level briefings in strict confidence, and you'll appreciate that the situation in Ukraine and with Russia is extremely serious. And on exiting the Ministry of Defence, and we have been for briefings in the past, of course, it's also the case that there are plainclothes officers that support Keir Starmer walking down not very far from the Ministry of Defence back to into Parliament. We were accosted by a rabble of what appeared to be people chanting about the vaccine, but also repeating slurs, which I won't repeat online, but slurs that we heard in Parliament last week, and the debate around what the Prime Minister said, Jimmy Savile, in relation to Jimmy Savile and Keir Starmer. It was incredibly aggressive, I have to say. It was very aggressive, very ferocious, incredibly hostile. And you know, did you actually
fear? Did you feel for your safety? Did you fear for Keir's safety? Because I've seen some of the footage, and you were doing a pretty good job as a bouncer, protecting Keir from them, actually shielding him from them. Did you feel frightened?
I think the atmosphere was febrile, and I've got to say that the behaviour of some of the protesters was slightly crazed. And in those circumstances, things can be very unpredictable. What I would say is that there were the protection officers who were also surrounding, because they're plain clothes, you can't tell they're protection officers, and I want to pay tribute to them. And there were 2 police officers, but clearly only 2, because this rabble crossed the street and crossed over once they had spotted Keir Starmer and myself. So it was a febrile atmosphere. Look, Iain, how can I put it? You know, I'm born and raised in Tottenham. You can take me out of Tottenham. You can't take Tottenham out of the man, as it were. And so I wasn't going to let these thugs get their way. And Keir was incredibly cool, very collected. And was simply determined to make his way back and into Parliament. But what they were chanting was obscene, it was horrific, it was wrong. We've got to be able to go about our democratic business. There can be no-go areas for politicians and for any Londoners, frankly. And this sort of behaviour is undemocratic. It's not in the spirit of how we have differences of opinion or debate in our country. It's quite wrong to behave in this manner, and it's very worrying to me that some of what we were hearing had been stoked from mainstream politics in the dispatch box.
Because, it is clear that these people probably would have been there anyway, and they would have probably wanted to accost you and Keir anyway. But given the Prime Minister's comments a week ago today, that gave them the excuse to be even more aggressive than they might otherwise have been, I guess.
Look, I've seen some of these characters hanging around Westminster in the past. I've seen footage of them in different protests.
Piers Corbyn was one of them, by the way.
I was surprised to see the speed at which they crossed the road and the hostility that they demonstrated to us, frankly, as parliamentarians. We saw a little bit of this during the Brexit debate, particularly. I was surprised to see the extent of the crazed way in which they went about making their political points. And so it was a free-bile atmosphere, and it was tense. It was tense.
What should Boris Johnson do now? I called for him earlier to go to the House of Commons this evening and make a statement and apologise and mean it for once.
Iain, he should apologise. And I say this with no partisan rancour. This is not a partisan moment. This is a period of time in which there has been a lot of people struggling with their mental health because of the lockdown. There's a cost of living. We as politicians have to be careful with our language so that we don't stoke this stuff. And there's a huge responsibility that falls to anyone who leads this great country. That was a fundamental mistake that was made by Boris Johnson, and he should be man enough and big enough to apologise unreservedly, to mean it, to say it, so that we can all draw breath and step back from what I think is a very, very worrying development, and concentrate on the things that people need us to concentrate on. And as I say, we were coming from a very important meeting on the situation in Ukraine.